Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about balancing. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, when faced with the need to balance practical outcomes with established best practices in software development, how do you determine which best practices to follow and when to adapt and modify them? This is a good one. So the way that I approach this problem is by basically saying to myself, do you actually understand enough about the thing that you're trying to achieve to know what to cut away and what to keep? And it's the same thing I say to coworkers and so forth. I had actually this exact discussion today because this principle is it's the foundation of how I do, at the very least, a cost benefit analysis or a risk analysis or anything like that. And the basis of it is literally that if you don't know enough about the problem, as I like to say, if you don't understand the problem, then you're going to do poorly. This is how the vast majority of mistakes happen. You have someone who's trying to make an evaluation or trying to make a decision about something that they don't really truly understand. And that's why I always start by saying to people, you have to understand the problem. If you don't understand the problem, you're not going to be good at picking a solution, because most software developers, especially the philosopher ones, they go about it the wrong way. They start learning solutions to problems. And that's great. It's just that when you don't fully understand, you don't try to solve the problem before you have a bunch of solutions, then you're just going to try to fit your solution to the problem, which is not the right way. You should not try to fit in the solution. You're trying to find out which solution will be fitted the best to the problem that you have. And so that's the first thing that I do. And today I actually had that conversation about in testing. So I was helping one of my front-end developers to figure out, basically he was trying to write unit tests for a form. And so I asked him, and I looked through his code review, and I saw that, well, okay, so he's done the thing that most front-end developers, but basically every front-end developer is absolute shit at writing tests. They really have a hard time understanding how to get into the space of the headspace that they need to be in order to write something that is meaningful. And so what he does is that he writes a test for basically just to make sure that, in this case it's a form, that the form was rendered. That's all he does. And I go, this is not going to be good enough. And he goes, why not? Well, because you have to think about this as a user. You have to understand that the thing that you are after is to assert that the behavior the user will have with your form is going to work. That's what you have to do. And so he goes, yeah, I get it. He goes back. A while later he comes, I get another pull request where I need to look at it, and I say, okay, so now he has asserted that if he has asserted that he can pre-populate the form, and then he checked that when he clicks the submit button, then he actually submits the thing, right? And I go, all right, cool. So now you have done one of these sorts of things, right? You have created a test case for a pre-populated form, and if you click the submit button, you call the onSubmit. But you haven't tested if you actually get the correct data. And you haven't tested what happens if does the user actually have the ability to enter, type things out and actually do these sorts of things. What happens if it's an invalid state? What happens if there's if there's an error shown? Have you checked if the user understands what's wrong if something goes wrong with your form? And he goes, but that's gonna mean that I have to test more and more and more. And I go, yes, if you don't understand what is going to cover the thing that you are looking to assert. So instead of doing a quote-unquote silly little thing like just checking that the form is being rendered, because literally he's just doing a snapshot or something like that, when it might not actually be necessary, just write this test. Have a test that goes to the form, fills out the information, ever so gently to as you expect it to be filled out. And I like to say use boundaries, border testing, where you have an empty form, you click that, make sure that there's an error, you fill out the form so that it's correct, you try that case, and then you enter some incorrect data or some inconsistencies. You get some feel for that this is overall working. And he goes, yeah, but there's a bunch of validation on these fields and so forth, so I have to test that as well. Yes, but not at this level. You can test that at the specific fields, but at this level, when you're dealing with an entire form, what you're trying to assert is that the form as an entity is working, because it's very important that when a user uses this thing, that you truly understand what they're trying to achieve, and that's the thing that you're testing for. You don't have to test for every little silly thing, like that field is there. Like it's the same thing I tell the backend developers when they sprite test for get functions. Get function gets thing. That's not meaningful. It's not, you don't understand what you're trying to assert. You don't truly understand what you're trying to protect yourself from with your testing. And that's the same thing when it comes to best practices. I've told many people this before, guys. When you say set up a CI pipeline, and there are tons of best practices when it comes to everything from running CI to how you do DevOps to how you do testing or how you deploy things, etc., etc. Everybody has an idea of a best practice, but fundamentally, how to know when one thing makes sense and another thing doesn't make sense comes down to, do you truly understand what you're trying to achieve? And most people don't. Most people, like a classic one is also like, let's your company is going to try to say be data driven. What does that mean? Well, for a company with more money than brains, as I like to say, what that means is they're going to hire a bunch of data scientists who can't actually help them. And the reason why they can't help them is because the data scientists and the business analysts and all that, those sort of people that they hire for tons and tons and tons of money, they need access to the data. It's just that they don't understand the business. The people with the money don't understand that their systems are not in a state where anybody can give them the information that they need to crunch the numbers. So the first problem isn't you don't have people who can analyze data. The first problem is that you don't have data that is accessible so that it can be crunched. And that's when a clever business person is going to tell you, oh, but Frederick, we're going to get some people who can who can do that. And I go, you mean the software developers? The people who have direct access to all the environments and don't have time to do anything but deliver on your business goals? You mean those people? Because to this day, I've never actually met a single business analyst who could even do a basic thing like implement Google Analytics on a website. Because that's just a ticket in the backlog for the developers until they can fit that in between all the other million things that they have to do. Which sort of makes the whole point, which inevitably always leads to the same thing, which is that the consultants and all the business analysts and so forth are trying to find workarounds around the fact that they can't actually do the thing that they're hired to do in the way necessary, so the value of having them there gets drastically diminished. And it becomes sort of the same thing like when you do a really shitty integration to a shitty system. You have to just try to shim in a solution that sort of works because you can't actually solve the fundamental problem. That's usually how I look at this. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that you decide between like the balance between being pragmatics or best practices versus things you have to do but to modify is that you fully understand what you're trying to achieve and what makes the difference. And that comes down to understanding the problem that you're dealing with and having enough experience to know what not to do and what to do. Because like most people who don't actually understand anything, guys, what they do is that they get religious about certain things. They will talk about test-driven development, they will talk about being data-driven, they will talk about, being solid, or like they're going to talk about dry principles. People who is in a general sense, you can basically assume that anybody who preaches things like that as the absolute truth and doesn't have any room for flexibility and actual reasoning when they explain to you why they're making a way off. If somebody tells you that, yeah, I'm being dry as much as possible because that way the code will be better, that's probably not the person you want to talk to. You might want to talk to the person who goes, yeah, we're sticking with the monolith for now because we only have 3 or 4 entities in the system, and it's sort of pointless to talk about microservices until you have at least a few services and some issues with, you know, code ownership, or maybe you have some specific module that needs the extra capacity and you don't want to scale that in comparison to like the rest of the system. Then you might want to consider splitting it. But to start off with, it's probably the easier thing to do because we don't have a lot of time and we need to ship quickly, and it's cheaper to keep one of these things running as opposed to something else. That's the difference that you're looking for. You're looking for someone who makes an informed decision based on experience and an understanding of what is the needs what needs do you need to meet in order to deliver on the end goal. If they can't explain how the thing they're doing is best suited to satisfy some end goal and can't walk you through how they came to that conclusion in a reasonable way, it's probably someone, as I said, who don't really understand that difference between something that is an ideal, the thing that we all try to achieve, like world peace or something like that, and what, you know, something like a strong economy looks like, which probably gets you closer to the thing you're trying to achieve, like world peace. Have a great day.